Gurudev. Jai Om Shripat Paramahansa Parijakacharya Ashtotra Shri Srimad Abhaycharanaaravinda His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Shripat Paramahansa Parijakacharya Ashtotra Shri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagwan Ki Jai. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Nashtaprayeshva Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhavagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. So today we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 31. And text number 28. Okay. Ityevam shaishavam bhuktva. Ityevam shaishavam bhuktva Dukkam paugandameva cha Dukkam paugandameva cha Alabdha bhipsito jnanad Alabdha bhipsito jnanad Iddhamanyushu charpitaha Iddhamanyushu charpitaha. Prabhuji. Shavam bhukva Dukkam paugandameva cha मुक्त्वा दुःखं पौगण्डमेव च अलब्धाभीप्सितो ज्ञानात् इत्यमन्युषु चार्पितः. Let's look at the word-to-word translation. You like to chant? Then chant, Prabhuji. इत्येवं शैशवं भुक्त्वा दुःखं पौगण्डमेव च अलब्धाभीप्सितो ज्ञानात् इदमन्युषु चार्पितः. Let's look at the word-to-word meaning. Ityevam, in this way. Shaishavam, childhood. Bhuktva, having undergone. Dukkham, distress. Paugandam, boyhood. Eva, even. Cha, and. Alabdha, not achieved. Abhipsitaha, he who desires. Ajnanat, due to ignorance. Idha, kindled. Manyuhu, his anger. Shucha, by sorrow. Arpitaha, overcome. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. In this way, the child passes through his childhood, suffering different kinds of distress, and attains boyhood. In boyhood also, he suffers pain over desires to get things he can never achieve. And thus, due to ignorance, he becomes angry and sorry. Purport. From birth to the end of 5 years of age is called childhood. After 5 years, up to the end of the 15th year is called Pauganda. At 16 years of age, youth begins. The distresses of childhood are already explained. But when the child attains boyhood, he is enrolled in a school which he does not like. He wants to play, but he is forced to go to school and study and take responsibility for passing examinations. Another kind of distress is that he wants to get some things with which to play, but circumstances may be such that he is not able to attain them, and he thus becomes aggrieved and feels pain. In one word, he is unhappy, even in his boyhood, just as he was unhappy in his childhood. What to speak of youth? Boys are apt to create so many artificial demands for playing, and when they do not attain satisfaction, they become furious with anger, and the result is suffering. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Let's do Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Shurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे भूतैर्महद्भिर्ययिमा पुरो विभु निर्मायशेते यदमोषु पुरुषा भुङ्क्तेर्गुणांशो दश षोडशात्मका सोऽलङ्कृशिष्ट भगवान् वचांसि मे श्रीकृष्ण शरणं शरणागतं कथा अमृतं सतत पीबतं भक्ति वेदांत मार्ग पंकनम सर्वलोक ऋषि देव जन प्रसन्नम सर्वलोक ऋषि देव जन प्रसन्नम. Hare Krishna. So welcome again to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam. So with the blessings of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, I wish to offer my humble obeisances to everyone, to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Gurudev. Let us speak and hear from Srimad Bhagavatam for the pleasure of Krishna. So it is said that whatever activities we do in our life, we do it for the pleasure of Krishna. Whether it is hearing, speaking, singing, dancing, cooking, whatever we do it for Krishna. So we have been hearing from Kapila Muni, his nectarian instructions and his graphic description of the helpless condition of the baby in the womb of the mother, the living entity, who after many lifetimes in his helpless situation in the womb of the mother, just before he is born, he takes the shelter of the Supreme Lord and the living entity, the soul, begins to offer prayers. And then what happens? As soon as the baby is born, the scene changes. Now the baby comes immediately under the grip of Maya, which is the Lord's external energy, and the baby or the soul forgets the spiritual knowledge that he has developed. So, in the previous verse, we saw that Vigata Jwaram, isn't it? Vigata Jnanam. And Srila Prabhupada explains it means that the spiritual knowledge which the child developed in the abdomen is already lost to the spell of Maya. So our suffering and distress begins right from the time we are born. So from birth to death, through various stages in our life, we are subjected to distress. So we saw that when the baby is born, it begins to cry. And the baby wants one thing, but then the caretakers, they are giving different other things. The baby wants probably to drink water, but then sometimes the mother might give milk. or the baby wants to be carried in a vertical way. But then we will put the baby on the lap because we don't know what the baby really wants. And because of that, the baby is crying and he's in agony. And then there are mosquitoes and insects biting constantly. And again, the baby can't even speak. And he is just angry and crying and all kinds of things happen. But at the same time, it's not just that. The baby can also be happy. The baby can also smile. The baby can also cheerfully dance. When we bring the baby to the lotus feet of Radha Gopinath, we take the baby and we start dancing with the baby. And then what happens? We naturally see the babies smiling. So we have seen, they lift the baby and then they will do something like that and then the baby will start smiling. Sometimes the baby will cry. So again, we don't know what that soul really wants. So in today's verse, we are saying that how the desires of the living entity continues as one grows older and when one reaches boyhood, which is the age between 5 to 15 years. And when the desires of the child are not fulfilled, the child again becomes angry and unhappy, and the suffering is continuing. So we have seen little kids, isn't it? Sometimes they put up tantrums. They say, I want this. And then when you don't give it to them, they will start crying. I remember when I was a little girl, I always wanted this one little doll that had a red dress and twinkling eyes. And I cried and cried and cried to get that doll. And then when I got that doll, then I was just so happy. And then I would play with it. Then after some time, the time comes when we mature, we grow out of that. But then now what happens? I have Damodar. So then all that tendency that one has to, to play, to enjoy, to serve. Now it is not just a play, but there is a bhava. We develop that. We begin to see the real desires that one should have. So it's not just the dolls and the toys that we play with, but we try to connect with Krishna. So at any stage in one's life, we see that our desires take different forms and shapes. And what our Shastras explain is that our desires cannot be denied. They cannot be starved off. But we can channelize them. We can regulate them. We can give them a proper path. We can address them. We can spiritualize our desires. And simply by following the path of bhakti and by serving Krishna, we can transform our emotions of frustration, anger, of whatever that has come out of unfulfilled desires, simply into the highest form of pleasure and happiness. So how that happens, we will try to meditate in today's class. So, in Canto 2, we hear Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, and he says, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udharadihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So, akama means one who doesn't have any desires, who doesn't have any material desires, which is very rare. Sakama, even if someone has desires for enjoyment. Or mokshakama, even if one desires to be liberated, even if one desires freedom from the entanglement of life. So no matter what kind of desires we have, Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. So with intense force we practice our bhakti. And by doing that, what happens? We run to the shelter of Krishna. And then what happens? Krishna fulfills our desires in such a way that we will not want any more desires, or that we will have no more desires, or our desires will all be dovetailed to giving pleasure to Krishna. So this verse was one of my Shiksha Guru's favorite verses, which he emphasized that we should all learn and try to practice in our life. So I'd like everyone to just repeat this verse. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udharadihi Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. So Shri Krishna as Purushottama, who is our ultimate benefactor, who is our ultimate protector, he gives us his personal protection. So we see, when we run to the Lord with our desires, what happens? Satyam dishatyartitamartitonrinam naivartadoyat punarartitayataha swayam vidhate bhajatam anichatam ichchapidhanam Nijapada Pallavam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead fulfills the material desires of a devotee who approaches him with such motives, but he does not bestow benedictions upon the devotee that will cause him to demand more benedictions again. However, the Lord willingly gives the devotee shelter at his own lotus feet, even though such a person does not aspire for it, and that shelter satisfies all his desires. That is the Supreme Personality's special mercy. So, it is very, very clearly given to us here that no matter what material desires we have, Krishna knows what's in our heart. Krishna knows where we are at. So if something is not right for us, then Krishna will not fulfill it. But at the same time, Krishna fulfills our desires in such a way that we can grab onto his lotus feet and never ever leave it. So how that comes to us will come in different ways, according to each one's situation, according to each one's nature. So after so many lifetimes, we have come to the path of bhakti, and it is not easy. We've had so many desires in all these lifetimes. But then in this lifetime, that is, it is said, Guru Krishna Pade Bhakti Latha Bij. By the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we have got the seed of the creeper of the devotional service. And therefore we have to nurture it. But then how do we nurture it? Krishna helps us through his own devotees who are serving him with love. Because on our own, when we try, it is just simply difficult. So Krishna arranges in such a way that we take shelter of Guru, that we get sadhu sangha, we get the association of the right devotees who can guide us, who can be our friends, who can help us to serve him. So we are seeing here in today's verse about children in the age group of 5 to 15 years. Now, what are their desires in general? What do kids desire? Any answers? Toys. So kids want toys. They want to play with cars and whatnot. If it's boys and if it's girls, they like to play with dolls. Or what else do they want? Chocolate, which is the most important thing that kids want. They want chocolates and cakes and ice creams and whatnot. And the minute you give them, they'll have a big smile on their face. Now, can we simply deny these to the children? Is that going to make them not be angry? The more we tell the child, no, I'm not getting you a chocolate, the more he is going to get frustrated, the more he will get angry, the more his negative emotions will grow within him, and it will just eat the child up. And then if such a child passes through youth and later on in his stages of adulthood, all that frustration just simply carries on. Because we have not addressed the root cause of that desire. But when we channelize that desire, so what do devotees do? They make such yummy cakes and, like we have, it's not the chocolate cocoa cake, but then we have cakes that are still filled with chocolate flavor. Or we have yummy ice creams, we have yummy cakes, yummy bhoga. We offer it to Sri Radha Gopinath and then we give it to the child. What happens? The child is nourished, the child's desire is fulfilled, and Sri Krishna is fulfilling the desire of that child, that as he grows, he will be so satisfied. Because throughout his life, he or she is getting Krishna Prasad. And by doing that, the child is constantly serving Krishna. Even the child's parents are engaged in serving Krishna. So it is not just the child's friends. When the child has a birthday party, he or she will invite all the friends to the temple. And sometimes we see devotees have big parties, outside. So that way we are properly channelizing and looking after the desires of the soul. And so much so what happens as that child grows, he will be so engrossed in serving Krishna in the association of the right company of devotees that that child will be constantly blissful, constantly happy. So all that frustration and anger which we saw has been completely transformed into the highest form of pleasure and bliss. So, how do we run to Krishna when one has desires? How do we even know that we have to take his shelter? Okay, for devotees, they know. But say for someone who is not yet on the spiritual path, people who generally have material desires, we see that when it is not fulfilled, they are still angry, So, what is the cause of that? Now, where does that ignorance come from? Because in today's verse we saw alabdha alabdhabhipsito jnanad iddhamanyushu charpitaha. Due to ignorance, he becomes angry and sorry. So, what is this ignorance? Where does this ignorance come from? Any answers? False ego, spot on. So, it is our false ego and our forgetfulness of our relationship with Krishna, and that is ignorance. So Srila Prabhupada says that the living entity's position is to know that he is an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. When he is actually in perfect knowledge, he knows that the Lord is the supreme worshipful object and the living entity is his eternal servant. Without this knowledge, he engages in material activities, and that is called ignorance. So when one doesn't know that it's the Supreme Lord who is our object of worship, when one doesn't know that one is an eternal servant of Krishna, when one has this Ishvara Bhav, which is tinged or not tinged, which is just completely covered with false ego, then that is ignorance. So now, how do we address this? How do we come past the stage of overcoming the needs from that our false ego is pushing us to achieve? So, by any answers? Devotional service. And even before that, how do we get there? Chanting before that? Before that? Hearing about Krishna before that? How do we even hear about Krishna? Surrender. Okay, all wonderful answers. Now to do all this, we need the shelter of a guru. And yes, it begins with Shraddha. That is, by having faith, we will get on to very soon. So at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, or when we study scriptures, what do we chant? We can chant together. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, we see the importance of taking shelter of our Guru, taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada, taking shelter of the Guru Parampara, who can show us the right path, who can help us to get past this whole tunnel of ignorance. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we see that devotional service is described as a beautiful step-by-step process. It is a science. So we are going to meditate on all the answers that we just got one by one. Adhav Shraddha Tatha Sadhu Sangostha Bhajana Kriya Tato Nartha Nivritti Syat Tato Nishtara Chistataha Ata Shaktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Bhyudanchati Sadhakanam ayam premna pradhurbhave bhavet kramaha. So, our process of taking to bhakti, the path that can help us to cross over false ego, the process that can help us to get purified, the process that can ultimately help us to attain love for Krishna, the process that can help us to channelize our desires in the right way. It begins with Shraddha. So Shraddha is, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. That is the initial faith. So that is the first thing. Now, even though whatever material desires and people are caught up in, somehow by the Lord's mercy, when a soul begins to have that questioning mind in the heart, who am I? What am I doing in this life? Why have I come here? What should I do? And then we realize that we have to place our faith on something. Now, people place their faith in so many different things, sometimes in all the wrong things. People place their faith in intoxication because they think that can simply just, it can give them whatever they need. Or people place their faith in, what examples can you give? What else do people place their faith in other than bhakti, from your experience? Husband, wife, children. Sorry? Black magic, astrology. But even wife, husband, children, we see Gajendra, who simply depended, on all the other she-elephants who can support him, but then ultimately he has to surrender to Krishna. So, black magic, astrology, medicine, so many different things. People place their faith. But when one begins to place one's faith and somehow have that little tinge of desire, I want to know what is spiritual life. Then what happens? That leads us to sadhu sangha. So sadhu sangha is the association of devotees. Now, when people have the faith, they take to bhakti from various different angles. Maybe they are distressed, or maybe they are just inquisitive to know what is spirituality, who is God, or they are after artha, they want money, they want wealth, or whatever. But in whatever way they take to the path of bhakti, when they come into the association of devotees, sadhu sangha, then what happens? Slowly they get purified. So somehow that is how all of us would have started on our path of bhakti. We would have just started going to Bhagavad Gita classes. Just let me, okay, somebody is asking me to come. So when I initially started, I used to get messages from the devotees who were, running the Bhakti program. They would say, oh, today we have Gita class on Friday, please come. Sometimes I'd be like so tired and, should I go? But then their eagerness will be so much that you will just feel like running to the program. So then by going and by taking association of devotees through sadhu sangha and by trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated, who are more advanced than us, and by their prolonged association, one gets purified slowly, and by the effect of that purification, one takes full shelter of the Guru. Now the sadhus can be many different sadhus that we are associating with. It can be our Shiksha Guru, it can be other devotees, our devotee friends, Now, in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that the Avadhuta Brahmana, he takes shiksha even from the python, the snake, from the fish, from the moth, from a prostitute, Pingala, from the ocean, so from the moth. So from everything we can take some knowledge. But all this is, let's say, it is Prakriti, we could say, but we are learning from that. But when we come into the actual association of humans who are sadhus, who can guide us on the path of bhakti, and then when we take shelter of a guru, and then when one gets initiated, one begins bhajana kriya. So bhajana kriya is, what is it? That is when our process of devotional services actually beginning. So under the guidance of Guru and Sadhus, we learn how to serve Krishna based on our different natures. Now everyone cannot be put into one box because it is not the same. And that is why we have the Varnashram Dharma, because according to each one's nature, everyone can be engaged in the path of bhakti to the best of their capacity and to the best of their talents. So the Guru and the Sadhus can guide us, they can advise us how to engage our nature, how to engage our talents in serving Krishna. Then by prolonged devotional service or simply by practicing bhakti, what happens? Anartha nivritti. So that is the stage of where we are getting cleared of all our anarthas or all the dirt in our heart. So artha means something that has value and anartha means something that has no value. So anartha nivritti is the stage where we are getting cleared of all the impurities in our heart accumulated for so many years. Cheto dharpana marjanam. By chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And at this stage of anartha nivritti, which takes up a major part of a devotee's life, we face this constant tug of war between the Guru's instructions and between our own conditioning, previous conditioning, and our own nature. So sometimes we may be given instructions to do certain things, but our nature or our physical condition may not be able to cope with that. For example, our Guru might say you have to wake up early in the morning, attend Mangal Aarti. Now, we might feel so sleepy just at that time. I can give my own personal example. It's very, very difficult. It is such a struggle to wake up. And therefore, what does one have to do? We have to push ourselves. Now, on my own at my home, practically, it's just impossible to do it. And therefore, what do? Sometimes I push myself. I have to go to the temple. I'll stay in the temple. I'll wake up in the morning. And then I try to push myself to sing Mangal Aarti, Kirtan. Because I know if I don't have that service, anyone can sing. But what will my mind tell me? Oh, somebody is going to sing. You can sleep for some more time. That is our internal nature. And therefore, we are constantly fighting with Maya. And therefore, I push myself. No, let me go and sing. Then, no matter anybody is here or not, I have to wake up at 3:30, put the alarm, get up, come here to the temple, show up before Radha Gopinath. All a long weekend. to be here. We could be doing so many different things. So when we take up different services under the guidance of our guru, our devotees who are helping us, we try to push ourselves. So that is Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. So constantly I have to remind myself. And my Shiksha Guru used to say another thing. What is that? I'm forgetting the exact word, but somehow or the other, you have to chant your rounds. Does anyone remember what that word is? Yani Yena Kena Prakarena. Somehow or the other, we have to chant. So all these are elements that can push us to deal with the stage of anartha nivritti. So then, but then what happens when we have that desire, and when we are fighting with Maya, Krishna gives us his personal protection and help. Krishna sends devotees who can help us, who can encourage us, who can motivate us, who can inspire us on our path of bhakti. So that is how Krishna is taking care of our desires. Then after anartha nivritti, as slowly one is progressing, then we come to the stage of nishtha, that is steadiness in practicing one's bhakti, steadiness in the path of devotional service. One becomes steady. So no matter what, no, I will chant my rounds. No matter what, I will go to temple. No matter what, I will do my service. No matter what, I will be in the association of devotees. No matter what, I will not cry. So all this slowly happens. And then after Nishtha, we come to the stage of Ruchi. That is, one acquires a taste for hearing about Sri Krishna. So we're all here for Srimad Bhagavatam class this morning because we have developed that taste for hearing about Krishna. So not that all of us maybe at this stage we have developed that pure taste, oh, I want to hear about Krishna. But still somehow, because one's guru has advised or one's mentors or other devotees are guiding, somehow when we come, we keep coming, when we keep hearing, then that genuine taste for hearing develops in our heart. Now, for example, when I cook, I always hear a lecture. Because I know that, it's not just the cooking, but the sound vibrations are going into my ears. And then, just before going to sleep, hear another lecture. Or keep chanting, hear kirtans. So all this slowly one can develop. Now, I'm not at that perfect stage of having attained Ruchi. I'm still a struggling sadhaka. But then we are pushing ourselves. And then after Ruchi, the next stage is Asakti. So this state leads one further to get that attachment for Krishna. That is Asakti. So we become so attached to Shri Radha Gopinath that we don't want to do anything else. Now, even though, I know this Mataji who is sitting here, Rajarani, somehow she's been attending Mangalarti every single morning. I have no idea how she does it. So that is all a symptom. It is, you can see that it is asakti. Sometimes devotees may not know for themselves, but then others can see it. And all of you, sitting here, it is that asakti that's in your heart, that it's that attachment for Krishna that is drawing one here. So then after asakti, one gets the mood, one gets bhava, which is the That is, our Sakti, when it is matured, when that attachment for Krishna is matured, it becomes bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. That is love for Krishna before we reach prema. So bhava is that sincere feeling that one is beginning to relish slowly. When one is away from Radha Gopinath, sometimes we feel like crying. During the COVID times, we couldn't come and see Radha Gopinath every day. 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers, you cannot drive. 6 months, 3 months, just being away from Radha Gopinath, you could really feel that, when will I go to temple? When will I go and see Radha Gopinath? So then slowly, and then Krishna reciprocates with us. Krishna reciprocates with each one in his own way, according to his own sweet will. So according to his own desire, we begin to relish so many different emotions. So bhava is not just, it is not inert. It is not like, I'm just nothing. I'm with Krishna. No, it is so much of exchange. Sometimes you can see, Krishna's probably angry with me, and that's why he's making me feel sad. Or, you cannot explain it in so many words. So one begins to feel, one begins to relish. And then that leads to prema, which is the highest perfectional stage of bhakti, which is real love for Krishna. So after all these 8 stages, one gets that matured fruit of bhakti, which is prema. Prema pumartho mahan. So in the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada says that under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain this highest stage. So we see the importance of taking shelter of our Guru, because without that, one cannot reach this stage of prema. So it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, the personified Vedas. So when the Vedas were created, they offered beautiful prayers in glorification of the Lord. And this was later being narrated by Sanandana, that is one of the Kumaras. And there, the Sanandana, he recites the prayers which the personified Vedas had offered. So there's a beautiful prayer which we will try to hear. Vijita rishi kavayubhir adanta manasturagam ya iha yatanti yantu mati lolamupaya kidaha vyasana shatan vita samavahaya guroshcharanam vanija ivaja santya krita karna dhara jaladhau. The mind is like an impetuous horse that even persons who have regulated their senses and breath cannot control. Those in this world who try to tame the uncontrolled mind, but who abandon the feet of their spiritual master, encounter hundreds of obstacles in their cultivation of various distressful practices. O unborn Lord, they are like merchants on a boat in the ocean who have failed to employ a helmsman. So the mind is like an impetuous horse. It is running here and there. So without the shelter of the Guru, it is very hard to tame our mind, to regulate our senses, to regulate, to channelize our desires. And therefore, the example given here is that of one who has failed to employ a helmsman. So one may have various different desires. It could even be our spiritual desires. But if it is not channelized in the right way, then it can lead to frustration, anger, which we saw in today's verse. So essentially in today's class, we are seeing the importance of taking shelter of a guru, of channelizing our desires in the right way, of spiritualizing our desires, of taking to the path of bhakti, being in the sangha of devotees. And by doing that, by inspiring each other, by supporting, by offering and giving and taking friendship from devotees, by serving Srila Prabhupada, by serving our Guru, ultimately we can have the hope that one day we will get a little drop of that nectar of prema for Krishna. So let us conclude by singing Guru Vandana, because at the stage when one has taken shelter of our Guru, then our mind becomes steady. Just as Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kamakami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So, when it is spiritual desires, we try to fulfill them with, how do we try to fulfill them with? What did we hear in today's class? Channelize. And what's the word? Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. So that's our takeaway point for today. And let us try to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada, who we are hearing that Prema Bhakti Jaha Oite Avidya Vinasha Jate. So when there is love for Krishna, which Srila Prabhupada gives us, at that stage there cannot be any ignorance. Shri Guru, we can all sing together, if possible. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma. Bandhu moyi sabadana mate. Bandhu moyi sabadana mate. Jahara prasade bhai e bhavatoriya jai. हे भव तोरिया कृष्ण प्राप्ति होय जहाँ होयते कृष्ण प्राप्ति होय जहाँ होयते गुरुमुख पद्म वाक्य चित्ते ते कोरिया आरना कोरी हो माने आशा श्री गुरु चरणे रति ऐसे उत्तम गति जय प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा जय प्रसादे पूरे सर्व आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आगम जनार बंधु लोकनाथ लोके जीवना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया एवे जश घोषुक त्रिभुवना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai.